Hello everyone, I am Subhajit Ghosh. I am a postdoc at the University of Notre Dame. My primary research interest lies in BSM phenomenologies in collider physics and in cosmology. Today I'll be talking about flavor-specific neutrino self-interaction in cosmology. This work was done in collaboration with Anirban Das from SLAC. So neutrinos are the most elusive particle in the standard model. The only known interaction of neutrinos are the electroweak interaction. However, as neutrinos are electrically neutral, they can very well have some secret interaction. So they can have self-interaction. Also, they can have interaction with the dark sector, which is also electrically neutral. Now, this kind of signatures of neutrino self-interaction people have been looking for this in like this anomalous signal in short baseline experiment, also in supernova neutrinos. However, today I'll be talking about only the cosmological signatures of neutrino self-interaction. So when people study cosmological signatures of neutrino self-interaction, they start out with a Lagrangian like this, where we have two neutrinos, nu I and nu j, and which is coupling to a scalar, let's say phi. Now this scalar can very well be a vector mediator. It does not change the phenomenology. Now, when you integrate out this particle phi, you get a 4 Fermi neutrino interaction of this form with a effective coupling state G effective. Now, all the studies that has been done so far take this coupling matrix Gij to be proportional to the identity. So this is the coupling of phi with two flavor of neutrinos, and taking it proportional to identity, meaning it's a flavor universal interaction. So all the neutrino flavors interact with phi with equal strength. And when you integrate this out, the G effective is given by G square over M pi square. Now, when this model has been tested with cosmology, specifically with the CMB data, it has been seen that there exists two modes in the posterior of G effective. One mode appears at the small values of G effective, which is called the moderately interacting or MI mode. So this is basically the lambda CDM limit of this model. There another mode exists for comparatively very high values of G effective, which is called the SI mode, or the strongly interacting mode. For this strongly interacting mode, the changes that you induce in the cosmology in the CMB spectrum actually can be compensated by changing N effective, partially compensated. And because N effective is directly correlated with Hubble, that means this model has the potential to solve income with the Hubble tension, which is basically the 4.4 sigma tension between the CMB measurement of the Hubble constant with the local measurement. However, it has been shown that this model does not work when you include the CMB polarization data. So what we have plotted here is the neutrino interaction strength divided by the Hubble constant. And when this ratio actually goes below 1, then we can call the neutrinos to be free streaming. Otherwise, the neutrino are strongly coupled. So for a typical value of SI mode interaction, you can see that the neutrinos decouple around matter radiation equality. Now, this is very late, and for that, you need quite a strong neutrino self-interaction. So the strongly interacting mode actually corresponds to a kind of a very high interaction in this sector. And however, if you take a typical like best fit value of the moderately interacting mode, you can see that that typically decouples around between z equal to 10 to the power 5 to 10 to the power 6. Now, in the top panel, we have also shown a plot in the multipole space where a mode which enters at this particular redshift on the x-axis will show up mostly at that multipole in the CMB on the top axis. So therefore, you can see that for the MI modes, you typically tend to affect CMB multipoles more than like 1000 to 1000. So this only affects the tail of the CMB. However, both these interactions are very high compared to the standard model neutrino decoupling, neutrino self-interaction, which is small enough so that they decouple around at 1 MeV. So this is the G Fermi interaction step. So we are kind of working with kind of a strong neutrino self-interaction. And for this strong neutrino self-interaction, you do expect some kind of laboratory constant. And there are huge laboratory constant on this scenario. So this has been studied by these people in this paper. Or if phi couples only to electron neutrino, you can see that like from BBN, from double beta decay, and from K1 decay, both these parameter space for SI and MI mode is pretty much ruled out. However, For phi coupling to muon and tau, the constraints are comparatively weaker. This is because most of the cases, the precision in those experiments are a little bit weaker than the electron measurements. However, if we combine all three of them, then we come to the universal coupling scenario, which actually has been tested in cosmology. And we can see that due to the overwhelming electron neutrino constraint, I mean, this whole scenario is kind of ruled out. So this brings us to the point of this paper, which is that we need to do flavor-specific neutrino self-interaction scenarios in cosmology, because, I mean, this is what is viable if you take into account laboratory constraints. But if you, let's say, try to do that, you want to probe neutrino self-interacting, flavor-specific neutrino self-interaction in cosmology, you first hit a hard wall. This is because that CMB is actually insensitive to specific flavor of neutrinos, meaning the way we identify neutrinos are the weak interactions, but for the energy scale we're talking about, which is the CMB energy scales, CMB is not sensitive to the weak interaction at all. So how can you probe flavor in CMB? So we can probe something called collective flavor in CMB, meaning we can distinguish some scenarios. Like, let's say the first scenario is that all the three neutrinos are self-interacting, so which we call three coupled and zero free streaming scenario. So this is basically the flavor universal scenario that has been studied before. So, and also in these cases, because for neutrino, for CMB, all the neutrinos are kind of equivalent for CMBs. So we kind of choose an same coupling strength G effective for all the coupled species, because they're completely, as I said, they're completely equivalent from CMB perspective. However, you can have another scenario which we call 2C plus 1F scenario, where two neutrinos are coupled, have self-interaction, and one neutrino is free streaming. And same as the previous, same as the case before, we choose same G effective for these two coupled neutrinos because they are completely equivalent for CMB perspective. And the third scenario would be 1C plus 2F scenario, where you have only one coupled neutrino and two free streaming. Now, as long as CMB is concerned, this can be electron neutrino, mu neutrino, and tau neutrino. Both, all of them have the same phenomenology. But for colloidal phenomenology, we probably want it to have tau neutrino, because this is the least constant among three. Also, to set the record straight, that we will be working with massless neutrino here, and we will be only focusing on three and flavor of neutrino, which is the standard model scenario. We will relax it a bit later. And also we'll be only talking about flavor diagonal interactions, meaning that like two different flavors of neutrino do not talk to each other. All these three assumptions can be relaxed, but we do not think that this will change our phenomenology drastically. Now, before going into the results, let's look at the effect of these interactions on the CMB spectrum. So what I'm showing here is the effect of some particular values of G effective for these three scenarios and the lambda CDM model. And in the bottom panel, we show the relative changes with respect to the lambda CDM cosmology. And left one is for TT and right one is for EE mode. So as you can see, there are two specific features. As you can see, one is the enhancement of the spectrum at high L, and also one is this wiggles. So for the enhancement, this can be understood like this, that if neutrinos are not free streaming, they are coupled. So they actually tend to induce a large density perturbations, which actually enhance the potential, and which in turn enhances the CMB. So that's why you get the enhanced CMB at the high tail. And why at high L? Because so these are modes which enter during the radiation domination, where neutrinos are the contributes majorly to the potential. So therefore, you see this relative enhancement increases at high L. And also there is this phase shift, which basically says that the lambda CDM spectrum and the neutrino self-interaction spectrum are a little bit phase shifted between each other. We'll come back to it later when we talk about Hubble constant. And the going from 3C to 1C scenario, what we see is that all the features are present in all these three scenarios. However, the features are milder, the changes are milder in 1C and 2C scenario, because we have less number of free streaming, less number of coupled neutrinos, which is closer to the lambda CDM limit. Now let's look at some MCMC results. So this is the constraint on this G effective on this three scenario. If we take the Planck CMB data, including polarization and lensing. So as you can see, for the 3C scenarios, the second mode, the SI mode, is completely non-existent, almost non-existent. So this kind of verifies the earliest literature, which says that if you take the polarization data into account, the second peak is almost gone. 2C and 1C scenario, what we see is that the significance of the second peak increases dramatically. And for 1C scenario, it became almost as good as the like a lambda CDM or MI mode fit. And also one interesting point is that the position of the SI mode peak actually does not change that much. So it remains almost constant, which is also very interesting. And also to see that how this value of the G effective is correlated with other lambda CDM parameters, we show this triangle plot. And as you can see, the value of G effective is mostly correlated with the AS and NS, which is the amplitude and the spectral index of the adiabatic perturbation. So this is kind of understood because the changes imparted by the G effective will be compensated by tilting and adjusting the amplitude of the CMB spectrum. Now, you might be wondering why there is a SI mode in the first place and why there is a gap between this MI and the SI mode spectrum. The SI mode interaction strength actually keep neutrinos coupled till matter radiation equality. Now, this is important because if you can couple them till matter radiation equality, then what you can do is you can affect all the CMB peaks. So you kind of affect the whole CMB spectrum, and only then the other lambda CDM parameter like AS and NS, which are global parameters, that induce basically global changes, will come and actually compensate for these effects. So this has been shown here, where we show the residual of the changes with respect to the lambda CDM. And as you can see, when we only increase the G effective to a very high value, then we get a big changes like in the red line. And however, when we adjust other parameter as well, like AS, NS, Hubble, and other parameters, we see that we can reduce the residual and get a comparatively good fit to the data. And also, so this kind of also explains why there is a valley in between this MI mode and SI mode, because for in-between interaction strength, it will not be able to affect the whole CMB spectrum. It will affect something over like on the tail. And then other lambda CDM parameters would not be able to compensate for those effects, because then that at small L, those changes, they will impart some residual changes. And also, this also explains why the position of the SI mode peak does not change from flavor universal to flavor specific case, because this is tied with the fact that neutrinos had to decouple at matter radiation equality, and this fact remains same for even the flavor specific scenarios. But the interesting thing that happens here is that you see the enhancement in the SI mode peak, and this can be understood by the fact that SI mode and the MI mode peaks are actually different. They are different feeds to the CMB data, because for SI mode you are getting some compensation effect. So it feeds some certain residual of the data with respect to the lambda CDM, as you can see in these plots. However, when you go to the flavor specific scenarios, because your changes are milder with respect to lambda CDM, because you have less number of coupled neutrino, you have more freedom to feed the residual. And that's why you see that when you go to flavor specific case, you actually have more freedom, so you can reduce the chi-square much, and you can get a better fit on the second peak position, and that's why you get the higher bump at the SI mode. So let's talk about the Hubble constant. So neutrino self-interaction can enhance H0 even when N effective is kept fixed. So this can be understood by the phase shift due to the free-streaming neutrinos in the photon transfer function, which is given by this phi nu. Now this phi nu is proportional to the free-streaming neutrino energy fraction, and which is given by this equation for these three scenarios. So for 3C scenario, this is 0 because there is no free streaming neutrino species, and this will be 1 for lambda CDM. And for flavor specific case, this is in between. And this is how the phase shift affects the CMB spectrum. So this is mth CMB, the position of the mth peak of the CMB, which is related to the location of the mth peak is related to the parameters by these equations. And as you can see, so if you want to keep the CMB spectrum fixed at the observed value, the changes in the phi nu has to be compensated by the changes in the dA and RS. And what we have found, that the changes in the phi nu are mostly compensated by dA through the changes in the omega lambda and Hubble. And this can be beautifully summarized in this 2D plot, where we have plotted H0 and the G effective. And as you can see for the 3C scenarios, for the corresponding SI mode peak position, you get a comparatively large value of the Hubble constant. However, since the significance of the SI mode peak is itself very small, this patch, this red patch, appears only at 3 sigma. Whereas for 2C and 1C scenarios, you have less phase shift compared to lambda CDM. So the Hubble enhancement is smaller compared to the flavor universal case. However, because the peak, the significance of the peaks are actually higher in these cases. So for the 2C case, you see that this blob appears at 2 sigma. And for 1C case, this one actually appears at 1 sigma. But as we said, the H0 is not as good as we want for the 3C scenario. So as you can guess that this scenario has actually will not have anything to add to the Hubble tension problem, because this is not enhancing the Hubble that much. And also this analysis is done with a fixed ineffective, and even in the paper we have varied ineffective also with this scenario, this 1C plus 2F scenario, and also we do not find any substantial increase of the Hubble constant in that case. And here we briefly show the effect of the BO data in the SI mode peak. And as you can see from the bottom plot, that whenever we include the BO data, the peak height is actually diminished. And this can be understood from the above plots, where we have shown the Hubble evolution and the angular diameter distance evolution. And as you can see from both these plots, that the BO data actually do not favor this SI mode evolutions, they actually favors lambda CDM instead. And that's why you get actually increase in chi-square, and that your peak height diminishes for SI mode. And here we are just showing you kind of for all the data sets what the result we have got for all these three scenarios. And most interestingly, for 1C plus 2F scenario, you can see that for all the data sets we have considered, the second peak is actually dominates, and it's actually as good as or something better than the MI mode solution, MI mode fit. So this brings to our conclusion. So the main point here is that the flavor-specific neutrino self-interaction is phenomenologically motivated. It takes into account the laboratory constraint into account and does then do the analysis in cosmology. And the interesting thing is that the significance of the SI mode peak is increased dramatically when you go from flavor universal to flavor specific case. It's sometimes similar in chi-square to the lambda CDM fit. However, the position of the SI mode peak in the flavor specific neutrino interaction does not change from the flavor specific case. So that's why the band that we have shown in the phenomenology plots of these phenomenology plots will not change much after this study. And also this scenario does not predict a higher Hubble constant, so it does not have anything to add to the Hubble tension problem. So the main takeaway message here is that flavor-specific neutrino self-interaction can provide similar and in some case a better fit to the CMB data. So if you have a model, you need neutrino self-interaction, cosmology might have a preference for that. So and the bottom line is that cosmology favors flavor-specific neutrino self-interaction. Thank you for listening.